Hi, I'm your coach, Ann Scottlin, and welcome to my live weekly Tuesday broadcast, Motivation Mythbusters. Please send me your questions and feedback in the comments or in the comments under one of my tweets this week. Today, I am talking about the motivation of desperation. Have you ever been desperate to get or achieve something? Have you ever used your obsession about something as a motivation to propel you towards your goal? Well, is that really helpful or is it counterproductive? So today I'm going to share with you 3 steps you can use in a practice of self-awareness that can help free yourself from the motivation of desperation. And I'll share with you how you can start generating positive motivation that can more easily bring you peace and satisfaction. But before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to one of my listeners. Fred from California writes, "Your content brings me happiness and satisfaction even when I'm way out on a limb. You are exceptional, an inspiration, and a leader. Thank you." Oh, well, thank you, Fred, and thank you for being such a supportive follower, and I hope you're listening to the broadcast today, and I hope something you hear today will give you some food for thought. And thank you again for your encouragement and your kind words. I always appreciate that. And if you'd like a shout out on my broadcast, just post a comment under one of my tweets this week about how the show or articles have helped you or made you think, and I'll be picking one of them weekly for a shout out. And you'll find me at Ann Scottlin. That's ANNESCOTTLIN. So today I'm talking about another motivation myth that we often buy into, the myth that desperation is a great form of motivation. This is the idea that if you become obsessed with a goal or outcome, you're more likely to achieve it. Well, is that true? Maybe. Maybe sometimes. Maybe not. This is the kind of motivation you may be leaning on when you say things like, if I can just blank, then I will be happy. Well, I know from experience, sometimes desperation can create useful motivation. If you literally don't have any food or shelter, or for example, if you're in a very dangerous environment and you need to get away. I've been out hiking on trails, for example, when I've encountered a bear, but that is a story for another time. That kind of desperation to protect my welfare, my life, to get away was very useful. But I call that kind of desperation survival motivation. Get away from the bear. This kind of a motivation, survival motivation, is very intelligent. And it's similar to the brilliance of animal instinct, as you know. It also forms the fundamental bedrock for Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Those foundational levels on Maslow's pyramid are physical needs and safety needs. So in other words, survival. But today, I'm not talking about survival in the literal sense. Today, I am talking about the kind of desperation we experience in the higher levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like our need for love or intimacy, our need for friendship, connection, or approval, our need for respect, our need for status and recognition. Each one of those are good and natural needs, and it's part of being human. But where this gets tricky is when our search for that next professional success or relationship or desire for status and recognition turns to desperation. And if you use desperation as your primary source of motivation, you create not only an unhealthy environment for yourself, you're also using a poorly effective form of motivation, because desperation is just, you guessed it, another form of negative motivation. And I'll talk more about negative motivation in another broadcast. But in general, just to be quick about it, negative motivation makes you constantly focused on, the negative. Take my squirrel for example. Well, he's not my squirrel. He's the woods squirrel. But he loves to hang out in my backyard and run along my roof and drive my 2 mini schnauzers absolutely crazy, thus also driving me crazy. But this squirrel, like many of his cousins around the world, I'm sure, has an obsession problem, and it puts him in a state of desperation that is absolutely hysterical for me to watch, but absolutely maddening to him. See, I love birds, all kinds of birds. Many of you already know this. And I have 3 bird feeders right outside my kitchen window, hanging from a beautiful crepe myrtle tree. One is a hummingbird feeder, one is a finch feeder that's full of thistle seeds, which is the finch's favorite. And I have yellow and red finches there all day long. And one of the bird feeders is just a regular bird feeder full of things like millet and sunflower seeds and peanuts to attract that greatest variety of other birds, which I also get quite a few. Well, Mr. Squirrel loves all those kinds of seeds too, especially things like sunflower seeds and peanuts, as you might imagine. And I'm happy to let him have a snack now and then, but he would empty that bird feeder in an hour, I kid you not. He literally gives me a run for my money. So I've tried a whole bunch of different things to keep him from emptying the bird feeder in a very short time. So I first had my birdseed on a birdseed tray. You've seen those. Well, that didn't work because all he did was jump down on the tray and absolutely feast until it was absolutely gone, chased all the birds away, and there's nothing left for them to eat. So then I tried something else. I tried a solid seed cylinder in sort of a cage, a bird feeding cage. The birds perch on the outside and they peck seed from the cylinder in the middle. You've probably seen those too. Well, that didn't really work either because the squirrel, Mr. Squirrel, would just jump onto the little cage of bird feeder and feast away until he knocked the whole thing down. So finally I said, okay, I did my research. I'm like, I have to get a squirrel baffle, BAFFLE, if you've never seen one. But all of those of you who like birds and have squirrels know exactly what I mean. So it's basically a big domed piece of plastic that has a hook on it and hangs from your tree. And then you hang your bird feeder from a separate hook underneath it. And this dome is kind of tipsy. Like the idea is if the squirrel steps on it, it's going to move and slip. And it's also so slippery and wide that he can't really get his little chin and face around to eat my birdseed. Well, I have a very smart squirrel, and he realized after a couple days of eyeing that baffle that he could probably still find a way around it. So he would climb down the string, the wire, the small piece of rope that hung from the tree, and he would then stretch out until he could just find the smallest twig of tree that was right the closest above the baffle. And then this big squirrel would hang from one back foot, one back toe, and then bat at this baffle with his front feet until it moved to the side. Then he would stretch out as far as he could reach, grab the bird feeder mesh, the little cage, with his little paws and pull himself down and feast and feast and feast. Well, I became completely frustrated with his antics. But the irony of Mr. Squirrel's hysteric antics, because he would just sit in the tree and chatter and chatter and chatter, he would get so angry that he couldn't get to the birdseed until he finally found a solution. The irony of his antics and his tremendous use of energy running up and down the branches, up and down the tree, back and forth on the roof, chattering and chattering, was that there was plenty, get this, of other food in his domain for him to eat. Even in my yard, there's lots of acorns and oranges, which squirrels love, and I have 3 citrus trees and fruit on them year-round. In other words, there is a plethora of other food choices for Mr. Squirrel, but what he really wants is the food that is the hardest to get. Now, I applaud his initiative and efforts, and if any creature deserved a whole bird feeder full of seed, it's him. But the issue is that he gets this sense of desperation in his head because he sees these wonderful treats just out of reach. But he misses the fact that the world is offering him up heaps of other food essentially on a plate. And instead of maximizing his energy by gathering acorns and nuts and fruits and all the other things that's available, he gets this obsession in his head, about the birdseed. I posted a tweet today that fits very well with our theme, and yes, it was actually inspired in part by watching one of my squirrels. And this is what it says: desperation rarely produces satisfaction, and the desperate man's cup is always empty. Again, desperation rarely produces satisfaction, and the desperate man's cup is always empty. That might even apply to squirrels, because no matter how much food is there laying around, Mr. Squirrel always seems to convince himself that he is in a state of crisis just because he can't get to the birdseed, or he nearly damages himself trying to do it. Well, I'm on his case here, and I'm finding new solutions as we speak, but I have got a bigger baffle, and he's much less likely to get to the seed now, which only makes him angrier. Well, poor Mr. Squirrel. There is nothing wrong with what the squirrel is doing if he wants to continue to just frustrate himself with desperation. That's his business. But this is what is happening. He's misusing his instinct, his survival motivation. He's misusing his animal sense of desperation for survival and using it as motivation to get that out of reach thing and causing himself a world of aggravation. When you use desperation as motivation, you're misappropriating your best energy and skill, and that's kind of a tragedy. So as I said earlier, today I'm going to share with you 3 steps you can use in a practice of self-awareness that can help you free yourself from the motivation of desperation. And I'll share with you how you can start generating positive motivation that more easily can bring you peace and satisfaction. Well, think back to the last time you experienced that aggravation of desperation. Can you remember what that was about? Was it about a job or a relationship or achievement or money or any number of other things that drive us? Have you had that experience that no matter how obsessed you are with one area of your life and no matter how hard you seem to run toward whatever that is you're obsessed with, that you often never get any lasting satisfaction? And a good question to ask yourself is, what are the side effects of this aggravation? Do you start emotionally beating yourself up? That's very common. Do you tell yourself, if only you would try even harder, you would actually have succeeded by now? So it must be my fault. I didn't try hard enough. I'm lazy. I'm stupid. I'm ignorant. Whatever all those negative motivations are that you use to beat yourself up. And do you take out your aggravation or your impatience on those around you? That sounds pretty familiar too, doesn't it? When you use desperation as motivation, when you're motivated by obsession, you are likely to be aggravated, frustrated, and experience a lot of pain and disappointment too. Disappointment in yourself, disappointment that you can't always have that thing you've worked so hard to get. When you are using motivation that is fed by desperation, you're not in your best self. And even if you do achieve your goal, when you pursue it in this way, you guessed it, you rarely experience the satisfaction you thought you would have. I bet you can come up with an illustration from your own life for that one too. No matter how hard you tried and how much aggravation it caused you and how much peace it took from your life, and even if you did achieve it, sometimes it wasn't really worth it and you didn't have the satisfaction you thought you'd have. Like the squirrel, this may be because you have misplaced your energy and you're likely to miss many of the other opportunities life may be trying to offer you. Or you may not see the big picture that life may be trying to show you. Now, this does not mean that you shouldn't pursue your goals and objectives. No, that is not what I'm saying. It just means it may serve you well to take a little time to slow down, observe, and even, oh, heaven forbid, listen to others, to trusted sources that may have objective and useful suggestions. If you've ever gotten a U.S. driver's license, you have had to take driver's ed. Yep, driver's education. Do you remember that little 4-word phrase that they taught you that you had to do when you drove up to an intersection that had a stop sign? You drove up the intersection, you had to stop at a stop sign. What do you do next? Now, these 4 words, you pretty much had to know this phrase to pass the written test. The question would be something like, what are the 3 things you must do at the stop sign in an intersection before you know it's safe to drive through? You remember what that phrase was? I bet you do. It was stop, look, and listen. I encourage my clients and I encourage you to take a few moments from your life every day to stop, look, and listen. And I'll break those down into 3 action items for you. Number 1, stop. Take a few minutes or even a few moments every day to just catch your breath. Literally, breathe. Just be still for a while. Quiet your mind. Just notice what is without any judgment. Become aware and take stock. Number 2, look. Step back to see what you might be missing. Pull out your mental wide-angle lens, if you will. Just check to see if there may be happiness and opportunities right in front of you that you might be missing because you are partly blinded by obsession or desperation. You don't have to change course, but it would be wise to not always be swinging from the same proverbial bird feeder when you could just sit up in the tree for a few minutes and notice the thousands of acorns below. And number 3, listen. Listen internally. Well, how do you do that? There's a few things you can do to help you get there. Close your eyes if you like. Take a few more deep breaths and just listen to what the universe or God or your gut or whatever it is you want to call it might have to say to you. Listen for that still small voice that usually gets just drowned out by your endless activity and the noise of life. Just notice what comes up. And that's it. Stop, look, and listen. And when you're done, do a gentle, mind you, be kind to yourself, do a gentle evaluation. And just make sure that you want to continue channeling your energy and efforts the way you have been. Or else maybe discover something you've been missing. And don't let pride keep you stuck in an unhappy cycle of activity. Now, bonus time. For an added bonus in your stop, look, and listen time, in those few moments that you can take every day, you can also use those moments as an opportunity to find the abundance or happiness that might already be right under your nose. Sometimes we're so obsessed with the goal, we're so desperate to achieve it, that we forget that we actually have things we can be happy about right now. Or that we may even have opportunities for abundance that we're missing because we're so ultra focused on this other goal. Use these moments to focus on the abundance you already have, even if your abundance is the air you breathe or the beautiful sky above. or the food and water you have to enjoy. I mean, focus on the abundance you already have in your heart, too. If you have someone to love, or someone who loves you, or the love you share with a pet, a dog or a cat, or with nature or animals or friends or just your fellow human beings, focus on the abundance that you already have in your heart. Focus on the things in your life that already are there and can create happiness for you. When you focus on gratitude and happiness that you already have, often desperation begins to melt away, and it allows you to find positive motivation for the goals you choose to pursue, the goals that are meaningful and that you deeply want, as opposed to those that you might have become obsessed by. Stop, look, and listen. I'm going to leave you with the thought once more that I mentioned before, which was in part inspired by my squirrel. And I posted this on my Twitter feed today, so you can find it there. And it is, desperation rarely produces satisfaction, and the desperate man's cup is always empty. So take a different approach. Stop, look, and listen, and tap into the positive motivation that is there just for the taking. Well, our time is nearly up. Thank you so much for joining me here on Motivation Mythbusters, and I look forward to having you here again next time. You can learn more about me on my website. That's AnneScottlinCoaching.com. And please join my other followers on Twitter at Anne Scottlin, ANNESCOTTLIN, for several daily doses of motivation and inspiration. And please add your questions and comments and suggestions. I always love to hear from you, and I'll pick some of them to respond to in an upcoming broadcast. I hope our time together today has given you some food for thought. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey. I'm your coach, Anne Scottlin. See you soon.